Hello and welcome to today's Media Associates International webinar. An AI caption translation of this webinar is available here in Zoom by clicking on Show Translations and choosing your preferred language. Hello, my name is Heather Pubels, and I am the President and CEO of MAI. MAI is a global network that exists to equip, encourage, and connect global Christian writers, editors, and publishers as you create life-transforming materials in your heart language and local context. In collaboration with our community, we hope to see these publications strengthen the church and impact society. We've had more than 100 people from more than 30 countries register for today's webinar. We'd like to welcome our first-time attenders. If you're a first-time attender, can you please click on the raise hand button so we can have a look to see who you are? All right, I see three of you. Well, welcome this morning. Thank you very much for joining us. You can put your hands down if you want. Please remember, everyone, to put your comments in the chat and questions in the Q&A box. We'll get to as many of them as we can during the question and answer time at the end of the presentation. Today's 1-hour webinar is entitled How to Edit Your Own Writing. Editing your own writing can be difficult, and in today's webinar, Kristin Argall will walk you through a self-editing process using a simple manuscript. She'll also be sharing useful resources to help you along the way. Kristin is the managing and commissioning editor at the Bible Society Australia. With over 18 years of experience in editing, she works on a wide variety of publications, including Bibles, trade books, children's books, and indigenous language resources for Australia's First Nations peoples. Kristin, I'm going to turn on my camera here for a minute. If you could as well, I just want to ask you a quick question, just to answer in a minute or so. Just tell us about something you're currently working on that you're excited about.
Oh, yes. That's something that's very exciting, Heather, is my boss and I are working on a new children's Bible for Australia. One
Ah,
of the ones that's very popular is very old and dated now. So we're starting from scratch. Well, not the Bible itself, because obviously that doesn't change, but we are creating a whole new set of inserts to go into the Bible. And what will be different about this one is that we're not assuming that the readers will know anything about Scripture, because a lot of Australian children now don't grow up learning anything about God. And so we're having to go back really to the basics to try and work out what words we need to define for them and things like that. So it's a fun process, but also very scary at the same time.
yeah, that sounds like a great project. Thanks for sharing that, Kristin. Um, let's see. Well, I'm just trying to get back to my script here. Um, it's great to have you here with us, Kristin. You can go ahead and share your screen and get started on your presentation. And then
Thank,
we'll check back in with you at the end when we do our Q&A.
thanks, Heather. Thanks so much. All right. So, hello, everyone. Um, I'm just going to make this bigger. So I'm hoping that you can see everything that's happening. This is the first time I've given a webinar like this, but I assume that Heather or someone else will let me know if there are any issues. Um, just a couple of things before I start. I just wanted to let you know that first of all, when I'm speaking to you, my eyes don't work properly together sometimes. So it may look like I'm not paying attention to you or I'm distracted as I'm giving the seminar. But I want to reassure you that it's just my eyes and I'm focusing on you, and hopefully it won't be too distracting for you. I've also noticed that I'm speaking quite quickly, so I'm going to slow down right now. One more thing. Uh, Heather mentioned that we are going to look at a sample edit as we go. I've actually decided to move that to the end of the seminar and we will see how we go for time. But don't worry, I've made up for that in other ways. The reason for that is there's quite a few things to think about when you're editing. So I wanted to give quite a lot of background information and tips and resources, and then we will go on to the main part. Then we'll go on to the editing. So what we'll cover today are the basics of editing, some resources that can help you, and as Heather mentioned, there'll be some questions at the end. If there's time after these questions, that's when I will be editing a document live with everyone, and you can see how I do it. If we run out of time, I will send you a sample Word document that you can do on your own, but you will also get my edited version so that you can see how I would have done it. Also, you'll notice down the bottom of my screen, I've got my email there. So I'm very happy for people to ask me questions about the editing or any other questions that you have. So now we're going to go on to the fun part. And I just wanted to say it's an absolute honor and privilege to be sharing all these tips and tricks with you tonight. Well, it's tonight in Australia. I know it's very early morning elsewhere. Um, I just feel it's a huge privilege that I'm spending time with my brothers and sisters here as we look at words together, with just the plan that we use our words to honour our Father and our Lord. All right, on to editing. So this might be obvious to some people and not obvious to others, but why is editing any writing important? I think we would all, if we are in this, probably attending this webinar, we're already passionate about clear communication, and that's what editing is about. It reduces errors, it avoids confusion, it makes it easier for people to understand each other, it helps people to work well together, and it improves efficiency and it saves time. So we'd all be pretty clear on what clear communication is about. And editing is one important part of clear communication when it comes to words on the page or on your e-reader or on a pamphlet or online. Editing helps because it actually helps us develop our ideas as we work through the words. It makes writing easier to understand. Importantly, it catches all those mistakes we all worry about. For example, spelling, grammar, facts that are wrong. And it also makes your work look professional. Something that we have to care about a lot with our work on Bibles at Bible Society is that any spelling mistake, even if it's in inserts at the beginning, reflects badly on the product or on the Bible itself. So we spend a lot of time trying to minimize any errors. So a big question, how do you know if your text needs editing or somebody else's text does? Sometimes we can be lucky enough that people will tell us, but you can't always rely on that. You need to have a pretty good sense yourself for when you need some editing help or some editing work. So sentences might be confusing, so you will find the text is hard to understand. One way you know something needs editing is that you have to read the same paragraph over and over again to work out what it is saying. Now, sometimes that can be because you're very tired, but in itself, that is usually an indication that something needs to be written better if a tired person can't read it easily. You know if your text needs editing because there are typing mistakes or spelling errors. There could be grammatical errors, so sentences don't follow the rules, which means that the meaning is unclear. You can have repetitive ideas, which means the same ideas are said too many times in too many different ways. There can also be a lack of focus, so the text moves away from the subject, or it's unclear about the main point. There's no clear structure. So these are all sort of signposts that editing is needed in a text. It's just not working properly. Uh, now, this is a little bit of fun, um, just to indicate why something might need editing. So I originally had a Peanuts cartoon in here, but then discovered that it probably was subject to copyright, which is another thing that editors have to be careful of. So I thought I'd just pop in a little kangaroo instead with the same story. So this is just a little bit of Australian humour put in here. It's called My Story by Kangaroo. So those times jumping through the outback were the best days of her life. Looking back, she once said, "Those times jumping through the outback were the best days of my life." Yes, the best days of her life were those times jumping through the outback. And here's the kangaroo thinking it could probably use a little bit of editing, which is right. Here you can see that there's actually a lot of repetition happening. Um, and for those of you that aren't familiar with Australia very well, the outback is kind of this vast open land that's in the middle of our continent. So, and because I'm an Australian presenter, I felt I needed to put a kangaroo in there somewhere for you all. All right. Different types of editing. The word editing can be a bit confusing because it can mean different things to different people. So I'm going to split it into three different sorts. Now, the first kind of editing is called structural editing. You can see I've put a little house picture there. It's really about how the writing holds together. So it's overall the big picture. In structural editing, we work on the big picture by we might have to change around the sections or the chapters. We might have to check the flow and the order of ideas. We need to make sure that ideas are easy to follow. We need to match the content that we're writing about to the book's purpose and the audience we're writing for. And we need to check that nothing important is missing. It may include a little bit more detailed copy editing along the way, but what you're seeing here is just making sure that, in a sense, the skeleton or the basic structure works properly. Some editors are very good at this. Some editors like me are not so good at this. We all seem to have our favourite areas of editing. But as the writer, you'd probably be more than aware of having to wrangle text to get it into shape. The next kind of editing is called copy editing. This might be the kind of editing that you are most familiar with. That's when we look at spelling mistakes, punctuation, grammar, where we want to improve sentences and paragraphs so that they flow well. We're correcting the style and the tone and the format so it's consistent. We may look at clearer word choices or change a sentence's structure. We're also fact checking to make sure that the information that we have in there is correct. We may have to flag possible copyright issues to make sure that we're not wading into legal issues. And it may include some light proofreading. So if you can see this picture to the right, imagine that we've gone beyond the house and we've gone into a room inside the house and we're starting to look at the details. And here, if you'll notice, there seems to be a picture that's not quite right on the wall. There's a dog toy on the ground, a bit of rubbish, the wrong coloured flowers, a wrong coloured cushion. So here what we're looking at is we're looking at the details and how to fix those details so that the detailed, like the interior of the document works properly. And then if we go to the proofreading stage, if you look at the picture on the right, we're hoping by this stage that things are starting to come together. We might decide that we're not going to change something we thought we would change, but we're making sure that all the pictures are level and the dog toys have gone. And so everything is in its right place. Um, for proofreading, we often have a checklist. Um, so in our one of our editing documents at work is we have a checklist of all the things that we need to look for when we're finalizing a document. So it's all the things like typos, spelling and grammar. It's checking all our references and footnotes. It's checking the numbering of tables and pictures and maps. We're making sure that all the page numbering, the page layout, formatting are consistent, and checking captions and headings and pages. Um, Something that one of the participants tonight asked me about ahead of time was if you've edited a document, do you need somebody else to edit it? Well, that's actually a really good question. And I would say that if you've edited a document, it's important to find someone to proofread it, so to check the work that you've done. No matter how good an editor you are, you will start to miss things because you've become so familiar with what you're writing about that you just don't see things that are missing or you don't notice duplicated words. So it's always important, just like a writer needs an editor needs a proofreader. Um, Later on, I will talk about what happens if you don't have the luxury of having somebody else proofread, and we'll move on to that. But if at all possible, make sure that somebody else proofreads your document if you've edited it. There's a lot of information on the next couple of slides, but you will be getting a copy of these slides afterwards. So don't panic too much if you're not able to write all of this down. Um, I've called this the editor's toolkit, and um, I've split it into tools that are widely available and should be free almost globally. And I'll start off with those. So, fortunately, with the increasing access we have to online resources, it is getting easier and easier to find help for editing. Um, of course, that does mean that you need a stable internet connection, and I realize that's not always the case for everyone. Um, so it may be that you have your hands on a paper dictionary and a Bible, and that may be all that you have. And if that's the case, you're off to a good start. Um, One of the main things that you need when you're editing really is your gut instinct, your feeling, how you feel about something. So, for a lot of people who are writers and editors, they are already quite natural with their language skills. We all may not be perfect, uh, but I would encourage you to trust your instinct about the flow and the pace of what you're writing. All of these extra resources are incredibly helpful, but you can get by without them, and for many, many years people did. So please be reassured that just make the most of what you can find, um, and do the best with what you have available. At the very least, if you can find a dictionary and a thesaurus, a thesaurus is a resource that helps you to find alternative words to use. So if you're finding that if you're using the same word too many times, that can help you find other ones. Um, we've also got, so we have a lot of free online dictionaries now. Um, Word itself, Word has a built-in spell check. There are Bible reference sites now, so we've got things like Bible Gateway, Bible Hub, um, online grammar checkers like Grammarly, and of course AI, GPT, all of those. I'll be talking a little bit more about AI in a couple of slides. So there you have some of the basic free resources that you should be able to find. You may only be able to find one or two of them though. There are some other useful resources that you may be able to make the most of if you're part of an institution, or you're working for a publisher that might be able to pay for a subscription. For example, I use Perfected, um, which is an organizational subscription, and that helps me with the final proofreading steps that I do for some of our books. You've also got other subscriptions, say for the Chicago Manual of Style. I will talk about style manuals in a moment. Um, their print copies can be very expensive if you live outside the States because it's such a big book. Um, but you may work for a university or a school or a not-for-profit that may be able to help you with access to some of these tools. So I thought I would start with AI as a resource. A few people sent questions in about it beforehand, so I thought we might as well get onto that first when we're talking about resources, because I think that's something that we're all dealing with at the moment. Um, I can sort of tell you as an editor personally, I'm finding AI to be incredibly helpful. I subscribe to ChatGPT. That's because my organization helps with the payment of that. There is a free version, so that's something to keep in mind. I think with the amount of cost cutting that's happening in a lot of organizations, and in my case, working for a not-for-profit that has to look very carefully at where it spends its donor dollars, we're finding that AI can be incredibly helpful in doing a lot of the routine work that we would normally do. I'm finding that it is freeing me up to do other tasks that are important that I haven't had time to do. So, some advantages, and this will help you as a writer as well, I think. It helps speed up the proofreading and grammar checks. It can suggest alternative words and sentences. It can really help with tone and clarity. For example, there are times when I'm working on a document and I just feel like I'm not quite getting it right. I can just ask ChatGPT to help me. I can tell it the type of tone that I'm aiming for and for it to help me just get there. Sometimes I can't seem to find the right words. So I find that incredibly useful. It's good for summarizing text or restructuring it. We've found that it's been very useful for non-native English speakers to help them improve the quality of their communication in English. It can also assist with fact checking, but I would say it's a really good place to start, but then you need to do the final research yourself. I think a few of us would probably be aware of the disadvantages. It can certainly make mistakes. We've had some very fun mistakes happen, but also some sort of serious ones. It doesn't understand context or nuance like humans do. So it's good up until a point, but when you get into the really nitty-gritty, important, subtle details, it's not very good. It may ignore some of the guides that I give it. Um, I may ask it to format references in a certain way, and I give it the online link to a style guide. But then it will go ahead and do its own thing. And then when I tell it it hasn't done it correctly, this needs to be like this, it will come back saying, I'm very sorry, and then it will give me new information and it'll have a different mistake in it. So it's getting there, but you certainly have to fact check it. Um, Something to be very aware of, I think, especially if you're a writer, and I have to be aware of it as an editor when I'm editing somebody else's writing, is ChatGPT can weaken your author voice, which means all of us as writers, we have our own personality and way of writing. If we use AI too much, that starts to disappear, and I would say that that is a loss. So you need to balance your use of AI with the need to keep the essence of what is you in your writing. Of course, that's not as much of an issue for, say, technical writing for a law journal or in a science journal, but certainly for creative writing, I would say you need to be aware of that. Um, and of course, the last thing that I would say is uh, when AI pops up with information, make sure that you follow the link and find out where it gets the information from. Make sure you're not violating copyright or someone's privacy or that there aren't ethics concerns. All right, on to style. Um, Style is something that you would have noticed I mentioned earlier in this presentation. It means something very specific when you're talking about editing and writing. What we mean by style is it's a set of rules that keep writing clear and consistent. Um, Editors love consistency, uh, and often you'll hear them say consistency is key. And that is because when you're writing and you have inconsistent spelling, or you've spelled a person's name different ways, um, anything that just seems to be out of place can make it more difficult for the reader to follow your writing style and your message. So, what we want to do is make it as easy as possible for the reader to read your material. So we want it to be clear and consistent. And a very important way of doing that is to have a set of rules that you follow as you write and as you edit your document. So these rules might cover language, uh, grammar, punctuation, the tone and the formatting of the document, what sorts of words you use, how you structure your sentences. Um, it could be, for example, when we edit quite a lot of material for Australia's First Nations people, um, often when a word is transliterated or English version is provided, there can be different spellings depending on who has looked at the material. So an important thing is setting up just making a decision about we are going to make sure that this place name or this language name is always spelt this particular way for this document. And that helps to avoid confusion. So as you edit your document, even as you write your document, write down all the style decisions that you make as you go. So you might decide that you are going to spell uh, the word church with a lowercase c every time you write it in your document. And so you would write a little note on your style sheet to say that you are always going to spell it with a lowercase c. That way you've made the decision, you have a record of the decision, so you don't have to make that decision all over again. So as you can see here, style is your friend. It makes editors happy and it cuts down the amount of decisions that you have to make. When you make your own document, this is called a style sheet. And the next slide, I think, yeah, this is an example of a style sheet that I made for a book we did a few years ago. As you can see, we've just put it in alphabetical order. And we've made decisions about what is formatted in italics, what has capital letters, what has lowercase letters. So, for example, every time I see the word, oh, let's have a look. Say the colony of New South Wales. Every time we see that word, we'll know that it's always spelt with an uppercase C for colony. So every style sheet, every book will have a different kind of style sheet. Um, And then that's something that you can then pass on to anybody that's working on your book. We also had these wondrous things called style manuals. Look, this is something that editors probably use more than writers, but they are incredibly helpful. Um, what they do is they take an enormous amount of decisions about style and they put them in a book. So one of the most well-known ones is the Chicago Manual of Style, which is probably about this thick as a book. I'm probably exaggerating a bit, about that thick. Um, I now use the online version, but there's also a Christian Writer's Manual of Style. Uh, and in my case, because I live in Australia, we have the Australian Government Style Manual. So a lot of our Bible Society Australia publications follow the Australian Government Style Manual. But then when we list our bibliographies and references, we actually use the Chicago Manual of Style. If you are writing with a view to having your work published by a publishing house, they may have their own style manual that they give you, and they will expect you to format your document with the rules that they've given you. So we're moving on to editing your own writing. And there's a few tips that I'm going to give you before we start working on the Word document. I'm just going to quickly have a sip of water. All right, that's better. Okay, so one of the first things to remember before you start editing your own writing is to try and get some people to read your manuscript or your material before you start editing it. These people are called test readers or beta readers. They may be a family friend. Um, they may be a member of your family. They may be somebody that you know trust. They may be somebody who you know writes well. The good thing is that they can spot mistakes or unclear parts in your writing that you might have missed. Um, it's important that you get feedback from people that you trust will be honest with you. Um, you need to be prepared to accept criticism, but it will help get your writing into the best shape possible before you start editing. Ideally, find someone who represents your target readers. Find someone who knows how to give helpful feedback. Find someone who is actually interested in your subject or story. You need to find someone, as I mentioned, who will be honest with you. Also, try to find people who are skilled critical readers so that they can analyze what you've written. Um, the tricky thing can be asking too many people and getting a whole range of opinions about your work. So I'd probably narrow it down to people that you trust and you know will give you really good feedback. And the other thing is, now this is very important. If you're going to be editing your own writing, as I mentioned earlier, what happens after you've been writing something for a long period of time or editing for a long period of time, you start to miss things, really obvious things in your writing, because you've been writing it for so long that your brain just starts to kind of almost make assumptions for you. You skip things, you miss things, you forget things. But one way of getting around that is just to have a rest from what you've done. So ideally, take a couple of weeks or even longer. So you've written your manuscript, your book, your article, and just put it to a side for a while. And then you can come back and you can see it through fresh eyes, and you'll often pick up those things that you missed. But we know, ideally that's what you would do. but we don't live in an ideal world. So really it's a matter about just giving yourself as much of a break as you can before you go back to editing your own work. This is why it's helpful to have other people that can have a look at it or proofread it. But again, it's not an ideal world. So even a short break is better than no break at all. It gives you a fresh perspective. It helps you spot errors and notice what's missing. And you can also see more clearly where improvements are needed. The same thing happens to me with editing. There are times when I'm in a real pickle by the end of the day. Um, and I just have to leave that manuscript for a day or two, or sometimes even a week or two, because I can't see the forest for the trees anymore. The next thing, this is something that is something to keep in mind when you're working with word processing programs like Microsoft Word. Um, you need to keep the text as simple as possible. It's very tempting in some programs to make everything look really fancy, but the problem is the fancier you make the document, the more complicated it becomes, and the slower Word becomes when you're making edits. So if you're making a lot of edits, you will find that after a while, even scrolling down a page becomes quite tricky, quite difficult. Um, the more you edit, the slower it can become. This can also be more of a problem with if your computer is older, um, and if it's a very big book. Uh, if you do have a very long book, it could be worth breaking it up into files for each chapter, and that way you should be able to get around this. But as well as that, it's a good idea to use just basic fonts. So say one font for headings, one font for main text. Remove any unnecessary formatting, and that will just help the program just to deal with the editing rather than all the other stuff that you've added or taken away. I thought I'd just give you a little tip here about paragraph styles. This is on the next page. This is something that you can find in Word, um, and it's very useful. And I've hopefully given you reasonable instructions here. If you're having any difficulty, I would suggest just asking ChatGPT or Google to give you instructions on how to use paragraph styles. What they do is they save time and they keep everything consistent in a document. So you'll be able to you can open your document, select the text you want to format, go to the Home tab in Word and find the Styles pane. Then once you open the Styles pane on the right here, you'll see that there are a few different styles that it lists, and you can click on the one that you want, for example, normal, and you'll get normal body text. And that just helps you rather than having to reformat every paragraph. You can select it by styles. It's a bit technical, but the reason I thought I would let you know about paragraph styles is that um, if somebody has given you a really messy document and it's all over the place, this is one way of clearing it up pretty quickly. Okay, now I am not going to go into any questions just yet. What I'm going to do, I notice we've got about, oh, let's have a look, about 15 minutes. So I'm actually going to change the document and I'm going to open up a Word document. And we can't really interact in this webinar, but I will be going through it and explaining some of the things that I will be working on in this document. So I'm just going to move that down. And Where have I put it? Here we go. Now, hopefully what you are now seeing is a Microsoft Word document. And what I'm going to do is switch on under the review tab, I'm going to switch on track changes, and that will keep a record of all the changes that I make. I will also be sending you a Word document that has these track changes in it. So you don't have to worry too much about making notes. I'm just going to start taking you through the process. So I actually had fun here with ChatGPT. I asked it to create a document based on the Sermon on the Mount with lots of typographical errors, grammar errors, um, capital letter errors, just to give you a sense. And it was actually a lot of fun to see how it popped up. Sorry, it was fun to see what it created for me. Okay, so I'm just going to go through, and what's going to be weird here is that normally I would edit in silence, but I'm going to try and give you a bit of a monologue as I go through. And then in about 14 minutes now, I can pass over to Heather for questions. So looking at this, I'm thinking the Sermon on the Mount, that should be a capital M because this is a heading. In the Gospel of Matthew, there we go. So we're getting some consistency in the heading. So one day, oh, and I'd be thinking, one day, comma, Jesus went up on a hill and sat down, and his, disciples. Now you'll see here that going back, Word actually showed that there was a spelling mistake. So I could change it, or I could right click on it, and Word changes it for me. He began to teach them, saying, God blesses those people who depend only on him. They belong to the kingdom of heaven. God blesses those people who grieve. They will find comfort. God blesses those people who want to obey him more than to eat or drink. They will be given what they want. Now, I'm looking at that going, okay, that is a Bible reference. Is it accurate? Not sure. It doesn't tell me where it's from in the Bible. So, quickly picking up. Whoops, just here we go. I'm just going to Google and I'm going to just put this in. Okay. So, it's found in Matthew 5, 3 to 6. Oops, sorry about that, folks. So first of all, we're going to have to put a Bible reference in there. Whoops. But also going to change the hyphen to an N dash, which is a longer hyphen, because that's what we use to indicate ranges of numbers in a Bible reference. But what I'm going to do also is I'm not going to do it now, but I am going to highlight that because I want to find out later what what Bible version that's actually from. But I'm not going to do that now because I don't want to spend too much time on that. Um, Now, where else? Uh, I'm just choosing selectively where we happen. Yeah, what I'm working on here. Um, Now, in this uh, writing here, this is an example of fact checking. Now, I'd be looking at that going, it is believed that the Sermon on the Mount was given in Jerusalem, where many of Jesus' most important teachings took place. Now, as if you were fact checking that, you would know that the Sermon on the Mount wasn't actually given in Jerusalem. So I'd be flagging that later to find out where it actually did take place and changing that. Um, it is believed that the Sermon on the Mount was given in Jerusalem. So here, whoops. Okay, the Mount of Beatitudes. So now if you are, so I've just briefly put that in there. If you had an author that was a bit wanted to, you weren't quite sure if they'd be happy about that, what you could do is insert a comment to go, Fred, I think this sermon was given on this mount, on the Mount of Beatitudes. So you may do something like that if you want to communicate. So this is called a comment box. And if you want to communicate with an author or a proofreader, this is a great way of just asking them a question about some text. Moving on here, we've moved on to a random comment that's popped up, which is, as Albert Einstein once said, be the change you wish to see in the world. At a number of levels, this just doesn't seem right. First of all, it doesn't seem to flow on very well from the paragraph before it. Did Albert Einstein even say that? I doubt not. I don't think he did. So if you're editing this purely to copy editing level, you'd be going comma, put it in quote marks. Then what I would be doing is, as Albert Einstein once said, I'd just be Googling this. There we go. So in this case, it was actually attributed to Mahatma Gandhi, which you could put in here. But what I would be doing as well as that is double checking that it actually was Mahatma Gandhi. What you'll often find with quotes is that people will say so and so said this, but you really have to do a deeper dig to find out who said what. So, for the purposes of this exercise, I was just going to put in Mahatma Gandhi, but if I was an editor or a writer, I would be just double checking and triple checking to make sure it actually was Mahatma Gandhi that said that. Um, I'm just going to skip to this next paragraph, a couple more paragraphs along to show you something else. Um, so Jesus spoke many other things that day, and then we're jumping to this next bit. Then at the end of the sermon, Jesus dropped a truth bomb. Now, um, why I'm picking that up is we've gone from a document that kind of has one tone that's just talking about what Jesus did. But now we seem to have started using a very colloquial or a very informal word called, we've talking about a truth bomb. So the crowd was shook realizing how deep his words were. It was lit, and the message totally resonated with everyone. So, while at one level it's reporting what happened, at another level, this whole paragraph just seems to have the wrong tone. The author voice seems different. So, uh, if I came across something like that in a document, I would be um, saying to the author, Fred, let's just Fred again, Fred, this paragraph seems to have a different tone or vibe from the rest of the content. Can you um, can you rewrite so that it fits the rest, the material? Now, if it was a writer, you'd look at that and think, oh, if this was your own writing, you'd think, gosh, I really went off track there. Don't know what I was thinking, but I need to fix that up so that it fits in more smoothly with what's around it. So, um, so I must apologize that I'm popping in around a bit, but the other thing that I would be saying is, uh, and this is possibly a good way to finish off. Um, as an editor, I noticed that scripture is often misquoted by people that think they know what they think that they're so familiar with scripture that they can just write it out. Um, in books that I'm editing, I'm always finding scripture that's been misquoted. The verses are wrong, the words are wrong. So even if you think that you are extremely familiar with scripture in your language and in other languages, make sure you double check everything that you are editing, that you are writing, um, and make sure that you've got the right sources for all this kind of information. Um, Now, for example, here, it could even, this is more noticeable in English, but uh, often people will swap and change the translations that they use within their document. So you might have a King James version here, ye are the salt of the earth, and then it's moved to a more contemporary version here. Um, so it's not only making sure that the scripture and the reference is correct, but you've got the right Bible version. Um, so I think that's probably about all I'm going to say for the now. We can move over to Heather. And again, like I've said, I've done a more detailed edit of this, which Heather will send you in the chats. So it's over to you, Heather.
Great. Thank you very much, Kris. This is excellent. We have one question in our Q&A and a comment in the chat. Anyone else, if you want to add any more questions, please feel free to do so. And why don't you just go ahead and put them in the chat for the remainder of our time. Um, just a comment here from Rick. He says, I have found editgpt.app to be helpful for editing, but as Kris pointed out,
Yeah.
you must be very diligent to accept or reject every edit and know your voice. It has different
Mm.
levels of editing, proofreading, improve, concise, rewrite. Excellent. Uh,
Ah, brilliant.
yeah, that's really good. We have a question from Atticus. Um, he's asking, could you keep the edits or revisions to a minimum before finishing the first draft and then begin the editing process afterwards? So, kind of when do you start editing? And then would structural editing be better once a draft is complete?
Oh, that's such a good question. Yes, I think, look, the ideal way to work would be to finish the entire manuscript, for example, and then do the structural edit. Um, I think actually, um, depending on your style of writing, often a structural edit will be part of your writing. It may be hard to distinguish them. At Bible Society, when we accept a manuscript for publication, the structural editing has to have already happened. So we will do the copy editing and the proofreading, but the structural editing is such a big job that that has to be done beforehand because we can't afford to pay for it. Um, so some authors need more help with structural editing than others. Uh, but that's such a good question because often, yes, the writing and the structural editing will happen at the same time, but it could be split into two processes. I'm the kind of writer where I just write stuff and then I have to put it together into the right order. Um, so I write in a very higgledy-piggledy fashion. So for me, the structural edit would come after the writing.
Yeah, that's great. Trying to see if there's any other questions that have been posted here. Just a number of people just thanking you for the things that you've shared. Um, what have you found in the as you're editing your own writing? What's most challenging for you in that process?
Oh, yes. Look, the most challenging thing is having to get rid of things that I would like to keep in it, but
Hmm.
they actually aren't really that important. I think there's an expression called kill your darlings. I don't know whether it's used outside Australia much, but it's that sense in which you've nurtured and crafted what you feel is just beautiful, a beautiful paragraph. And then you get to a stage where you realize it's beautiful, but it actually doesn't add anything to the book or to the article. And you can think it's great. And sometimes the most heartbreaking thing is when an editor comes back and says, it just doesn't mean anything to me. So I think getting rid of texts that you've toiled over and you love, but ultimately aren't important.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
I found that too. Like when you have a limited word count, there's
Oh,
just
yeah.
like things that you really want to keep, but you have to cut them because the word count doesn't give you enough space. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you really just have to focus on the clear message rather than what you'd just like to just slip in.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
We have a question from Loletta asking,
Mhm.
how long should sentences be for a chapter book for young readers? Uh,
Oh,
the number of words per sentence, she's asking.
oh, look, that's such a good question. And I wish my manager was here answering that question, because she is a children's writer and I am not. Um, I am working on this children's Bible with her at the moment, though, and I would say that I've definitely had to learn to write in shorter sentences.
Mhm.
But look, I'm probably not the best person to answer. I'm really sorry about that. But if you want to send me an email with that question, I can ask my boss and get back to you. So very happy to help you with that indirectly.
Great. Thank you for
Yeah,
that. Kristen's email is posted in the chat, and we can include that in our follow-up email after
lovely.
this. Another
Yeah.
question from David. It says, suppose you get a poorly done manuscript. To what
Mm.
extent can you edit to avoid losing the author's voice?
Oh, do you know what? That's such a good question. A couple of years ago, in a very unusual situation, we had to edit a very, very bad manuscript and turn it into a book. Um, and so it was a very difficult situation, but one of the criticisms of the author at the end of it was that we had got rid of his author's voice.
Mm.
So that was difficult because really to make it work as a manuscript, to make it communicate the message, we had to interfere with it so much that he had very little left of his voice. he ended up sort of having another go at it. And the end result was that we had a book that probably neither the author nor the editors
Hmm.
were particularly happy with. It ended up being a bit of a mishmash. Um, as a freelance editor, I've had a couple of books that I had to work on that were not well written. In that situation, it was difficult because I could choose to accept or not accept the job, and I just made it clear to the author that there would be a big rewrite, and they were happy with that. Um, and then we had to go back and try and bring some of her voice back in at times. But it's a very difficult situation, and it doesn't always end well.
Yeah, I imagine. I imagine in some cases, if you have an inexperienced writer, especially, maybe you have to say, "Hey, I almost need to be your ghostwriter."
Yes, yes, and in one instance, we've had the writer wasn't happy to have a ghostwriter.
Hmm.
They thought their work was great,
Hmm.
uh, and we just had to cancel the contract because they didn't see anything wrong. So, yeah, it's a very painful position to be in,
Yep. Yeah.
especially especially if the writer doesn't see the problem. Those that see the problem are great to work with because you can almost start from scratch and have a really good partnership.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. I mean, it is a partnership. I think that's an important part of that.
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
and Christy, you were also talking about some audience testing in your presentation, and it seems
Yeah,
like that would also bring some of those writing weaknesses to light.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And look, and this is, and I just have to confess that I have quite a thin skin. I find it hard to accept criticism. I'm hoping as I grow older that I'm improving in that area. But I know, so this is recommending something that I know is difficult for me. But for you as writers, if you can accept criticism, try not to get too upset and see it as a really valuable process. That is incredibly helpful. And just try and remember that people giving you feedback are doing it really hopefully, genuinely because they want your book to be a better book.
Mm, yeah.
It's quite a journey in humility.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
great. Another question here. How much of your work is fair to give to someone to read? If I find the document is too large, people put off reading it and getting back to me. Should I just send a percentage of it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Look, it might depend on how well you know the person and how good a friend they are. Also, how quickly they read. Um, I think, um, yeah, that's a tricky one. I think it really depends. Personally, the better I know a person, the more likely I am to ask them to read the whole manuscript. Um, but I think you can always offer just to have a chat with them and tell them what your plan and your dream is for the manuscript. Here's the outline.
Hmm.
Um, how much would they be interested in reading and give them an opportunity to say how much they'd like to read or not.
Yeah, that's great. Um,
Yeah.
is there anything else? Let me just scan through. Yeah. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us, Kris, that you haven't already shared? Any closing thoughts?
Oh, look, I want to encourage you all about how important it is that you're doing what you're doing. I think um, words are so important, and I think if with everything that's kind of, this sounds a bit cliche, but with everything that's going on in the world and in our own corners of the world, we know the importance of speaking truth into situations, of encouraging people. Um, I think of the Psalms where the person that's writing the Psalms talks about not remaining silent about all the amazing things that God has done. And the psalmist talks about shouting it out to everyone who will hear how wondrous God is. And I kind of feel that that's what we're doing with the writing and the books and the publishing at the moment is um, we may not be writing psalms that will end up in a Bible, but we are testifying to how good our Father is and his amazing love and his compassion. And so I just want to encourage you to keep doing what you're doing. Um, the whole publishing process can be very long and very frustrating, but it's totally worth it. And you're what you're putting into words is testifying to our amazing creator. And I just think that's a wonderful vocation.
Great. Thank you very much, Kris.
No worries. No worries. It was a pleasure. Thanks, Heather.
Yep. Mia, if you could go ahead and get our closing slides up. This webinar has been recorded. All participants will receive a link to the recording within 24 hours or so, and it will also be posted on the MAI YouTube channel. And the handle for that is at MAI Lit World. So look for that. We want to know how we can serve you better through our webinars. There's a QR code on your screen and a link in the chat panel where you can go to take a very short survey. Please do that before you come out of the webinar today. Make sure you look out for our next webinar in English. It's scheduled for November 18th at 3 p.m. Johannesburg or 1 p.m. UTC time. It's entitled Soul Care, Nurturing Hope and Creativity to Honor God's Call to Write. It's being presented by author Joanne Campbell. If you are wondering what's happening in October, we'll be launching a self-directed online course. And so be watching your email for more details on that. MAI regularly offers training in writing, editing, and publishing, both online and in person. We encourage you to go to maiglobal.org to find out more and discover more resources and information. Thank you to all of you who joined and participated with us. I'm Heather Pubels, your host, along with Mia Toganon, our technical assistant. The QR code for our survey will be going back up soon, so you can provide us with feedback before you sign off. The survey should only take a minute, and your input is valuable. Until next time, keep writing, everyone.